I'm very happy actually to be in this last exhibition of Luca, because Luca and I go back a long time. When he first started to do projects with Luigi Ontani, who lives here in Rome, and he came and visited us on Lago d'Orta. And so we've been coming to this museum just as tourists 3 or 4 times, and we love this neighborhood. Even though the museum itself is so monumental, it's scary sometimes if you don't. How do you fill it, or where do you fill it? So that was, there were several propositions for me that I would do things that were half outside. But these kinds of works that people call toys, I call them divinities. They're very fragile after a while, with temperature, with rain, anyway, it worked out perfectly because the person who actually was one of my first mentors as an artist was Alan Capro. I was an assistant professor at the California Institute of the Arts in Los Angeles. And Alan Capro was one of the deans. And because I said no to having these pieces outside, when you arrive from the other street, finally Luca had the idea of the famous yard piece in the days of Alan Capro when he was a happening artist, which is all those tires that people play on. And so and that piece works absolutely perfectly for that space. But in fact, the reason why it became available is because I found these guys to be just too fragile. But at the same time, it brings the history. The first time I ever worked as an artist in Europe was here in Rome, at Piazza del Popolo, very close to Fabio Sargentini. And my mentor, when I was even younger than that, was the California Institute of the Arts with Alan Capro, who's in this show too. So all these things sort of came together, and that makes me very happy to have integrated all this. And we love that market. Every time we come here, we always go all around the shops because it's all mom and pop kind of shops here, not the new chic tourist big cities still. And that's where the after opening event will be, in that market, the closed market. We love that market, actually. So these guys fly, and they weren't meant to fly. I mean, they were actually meant to sit a little bit like what I'm sitting on. I mean, they were meant to be like bouquets of flowers on the ground. But Luca really wanted, because I have works that are with parachutes. I used to be a pilot when I was in the late 70s in Sweden. I learned to be a pilot, and so I have things that fly, and I have a whole lot of works like parachutes, but they're not strong enough for these kinds of immense spaces. And I had just finished doing I've made about 75 of these, not knowing where I was going to show them. I thought they would be on the ground. And so this is they are now, some of them in a show in Hangar Y in Meudon in France, which is an enormous aerodrome from the 19th century that's become a contemporary art presentation. It's between Paris and Versailles. And so there are a few of them there, but this is the biggest one that I did. And the technicians here, because I didn't know how they should be presented. And they found a fantastic way to present them. And Fabio, who's the technician, he had already worked with me at the church of how do you say, the church of Gavin Brown here in Trastevere. Yeah, and so we had already worked together for a whole week on a work without this incredible machine that was amazing for doing this. It's also called an Octopus 9 or something like that. So it works very well with the logo of the macro, and so we all placed them together, and there are 36. So I had done 35, and then Luca left for a show of another old friend, Milo Prini, in Bolzano, because I know Prini from the first days I ever came to Rome. And he's sadly parted from us for almost 10 years ago now. And he had left, and so only this one we hadn't hung. And I said, when I saw it on the floor with all the 35 others in the other space also, when it was shocking to see it actually now, even though it was originally made to be on the floor, but to have 35 of them flying, and this one on the ground. I said to him, it's so shocking, we should keep it there. And so he didn't even move it from where I left it. This was last week, because he hadn't come back from Bolzano. And and I love that they left all the wires as though it were supposed to be. So that's, and my story with the stuffed animal toy, I was born 4 kilometers from where the teddy bear was invented in Brooklyn, New York. It was invented after the president in 1902 was Theodore Roosevelt, and he was a hunter, and there's a famous story where he doesn't kill a bear because it's a young bear, and he had the idea that it was a publicity stunt, and he would be killing an animal for a publicity stunt, and he refused. And that bear became his mascot, called Teddy's Bear. And then there was a famous journalist called Clifford Berryman, who started to make political cartoons about the President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, and always in his cartoon, there's this little bear. And this couple from Eastern Europe, Jewish couple from near to Lithuania and Belarus, which is where my textile family comes from, and who lived 3 kilometers from where I was born in Brooklyn. But earlier in 1902, I was born in 1947. But so they were the generation of my grandparents. They invented this little bear, put it in their shop window. They had a candy store, and the world went crazy and fell in love with this toy. And it became the most, within a few years, millions were sold. And a company in Germany called Steiff, which has a button in the ear, continued this tradition in Germany, which still exists. And so that's where my connection to all this came from, but also that these animals were my friends when I was young. I had very bad relationship with my parents, and so they became my best friends, and that's where my music first started. I would talk and sing with them when I was a little boy. And so, because people say, okay, but what's the connection? What does this have to do with your sort of magical, dronable, sound things? Well, because the first place I ever did those magical sound things was with them when I was like 2 and 3 years old in Brooklyn. And so that's where it sort of all comes together. This show, often when I do a show, it has also some kind of sound environment. But because of the Trini already has his installation, which I decorated also, because I thought it was too sad that he was in this sort of, I cleaned that hole in the big red monster theater thing. It hadn't been cleaned in like years, and we illuminated it, and then you see the illumination in red because it is red underneath. And then I happened to have brought these garlands, and we decorated the garlands, and that's what then is his sort of altar, where this political message from around 1976, I believe, was recorded and now played in boucle in a loop for the show. So for me, there are all these connections. It's not just, and because I'm staying across the street from the Locarno, which was the first hotel. It's really funny, it's the history of the art world in a way. When I was here 52 years ago, that was a 2-star hotel. Fabio Sargentini put us all up there because it was cheap, and it was like well-placed, and he had a gallery in a garage like about 300 meters from Piazza del Popolo. Now it's a 5-star hotel. And it hasn't changed. I mean, externally, I'm trying to imagine how the rooms have become. They used to be like 30, the equivalent of 30 euros a night, and now they're 350 euros a night. So but that's happened to the entire world, the art world and the fashion world, and so that's where, and that's right near to the Borsellino store. And my mother was a hat designer, and so I always had hats, and my mother always wore caps. And I'm Jewish, so I didn't do it for a religious reason, but I have like hundreds of hats and caps. But this one came from today. I went into the shop. It's not a very big shop. It's right off of next to Canova, the Cafe Bistro. And there was only one hat that fit me perfectly like Cinderella, and this is the one. And I don't have a hat of this kind of red. It's perfect on it. The only problem is, again, in 1972, it was about 80 euros, and now it's 430. But I bought it anyway. I mean, the world has become, the world is much harder for your generation than it was from when I was a young artist. We were able to do, arte povera was not just a term. You could do art with nothing. And you didn't need a lot of money and not a lot of production like you do now. So I think now I've done a lot more than 5 minutes. And so I wish everybody a really good, great show, the last show of this regime, we could say, of macro, and I wish everybody well, and I'm very happy to be here. And my flying friends, they seem to be okay. They don't have, no one's vomited from fear of heights or anything like that. So thank you.